Insights of All Trades podcast.
So I basically went to New Zealand it was just shy of a year in 2004 to kind of gauge the pulse of the public when it came to genetically modified organisms. That was kind of a hot button issue at the time. Yeah.
There's definitely some controversies out there, right, surrounding GMOs, and there's people that have their own opinions on it, right?
Right.
So what's your take on it? And
I mean, I've been following genetically modified organisms, GMOs, basically since their initial release back in, 1994 was technically the first release, but it wasn't really rolled out wide scale until 1996.
Okay. Do you know what organism that was? Like, what did they work with first?
So it was basically corn and soybeans were kind of the big ones.
Okay.
And it's broadened a little bit. You know, a lot of the public seems to think that all of their crops are genetically modified. Mm-hmm. And again, that's kind of a nebulous phrase. What does it mean to be genetically modified? Does conventional breeding and selection qualify as a GMO?
You would think, right?
And I would argue, yes, it does, but Uncle Sam says otherwise.
Okay.
That the label GMO is specific to basically any sort of what's called recombinant techniques or methods. So literally cutting and pasting a gene of interest, right, from one organism into another.
Okay.
And basically the donor gene, that species, is typically not even remotely related to the recipient species. So you're taking like bacterial genes and inserting them into plants, etc. So not even in the same kingdom necessarily.
Right.
And I think this is where a lot of the apprehension among the public kind of arises from. And, I understand that to a point. But if you look at it, I mean, in terms of horizontal gene transfer events, so there's kind of vertical gene transfer, which is like parent to offspring, just kind of conventional sexual reproduction, right?
Okay.
Right? We are kind of a composite of our mothers and fathers. But you also have so-called horizontal gene transfer events, which is basically would be like me, the equivalent of me physically coming up to you and touching you and saying, here you go, have some genetic material.
Yeah.
It's all yours.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And that happens naturally in nature.
Through bacteria mostly, right?
Through bacteria, through viruses. I mean, a lot of our genome, we have basically remnants of kind of viral invasion events for all intents and purposes that have just been kind of left behind in our genome.
Okay. Can you think of any examples of that, or just it's too widespread?
Too widespread. I mean, a lot of our genome is kind of vestigial. Wow. It's just leftover past events. And it doesn't necessarily do anything for us. They're kind of pseudogenes, which means they're kind of they're abbreviated. So that they're not fully functional, and they're just kind of in our genome.
So could these maybe be things that are like the introns that get spliced out, or not necessarily?
I believe introns are a different ballgame.
Okay.
But you're on the right. So you have exons and introns, right?
Yeah.
Introns get spliced out typically. So post, mRNA production, etc. But when we talk about, kind of the integrity of a species, right? And people think species are immutable. That's not really the case. These horizontal gene transfer events take place quite frequently.
Okay.
I mean, there's a case just recently. Scientists found kind of residual bacterial genes in sweet potato.
Wow.
And this event, they actually kind of backdated when they thought this occurred. And this was well in advance of any human-mediated gene transfer. So clearly this happened organically, pun intended, in nature. I mean, heck, also that there are cases of, I might get the order switched in this case. I believe it was caterpillar genes that were found in basically a stinging insect.
Wow. Okay.
So how the heck that happened
does that have to
is unclear.
Yeah. So could that only happen through like viruses?
It might have been
exactly.
It might have involved an intermediary like a virus. I'd have to look at the paper again. But so clearly it wasn't a sexual transfer because they're just not sexually compatible. But there was some middleman that facilitated that gene transfer.
Yeah.
And this happens. This is totally natural. The whole model for genetic transformation that we use today is based on a natural model that occurs in the wild.
Right, okay.
So you have
That's interesting.
Agrobacterium tumefaciens. So it's a bacterium, obviously, that causes a condition called crown gall in plants.
Okay.
And crown gall, it just looks like kind of this big tumorous mass, more
Okay,
or less,
on the
growing
plant?
on the
Okay.
plant itself. So that's how you know it's been infected with this bacterium. And that mass is basically, essentially kind of reprogrammed, rewritten plant tissue.
Ah,
The
okay.
bacteria directs the plant to kind of rewrite its genome and in turn turns the plant into a glorified factory for making specific metabolic compounds that are advantageous, of course, to the bacterium.
Okay, wow. Yeah, that's
Weird
interesting.
stuff.
Yeah.
So what we do then, we've observed this, right, in nature, and we say, okay, well, let's use this as kind of an inspirational launch pad, and we can kind of selectively cut out the genes that cause this crown gall condition and just use the bacteria itself, the agrobacterium, as a vector, as a delivery mechanism to deliver genes of interest that we are interested in, that actually agronomically, so like field conditions, help improve the crop in some
Yeah.
capacity,
Okay.
be it nutritionally, be it herbicide tolerance, or the ability to make its own built-in pesticide.
Wow.
That's totally biodegradable.
Yeah.
So really interesting stuff.
That is interesting
But
stuff.
people don't understand the subtleties
Yeah.
of all this.
They just hear GMO and you just,
GMO, Frankenfoods,
yeah,
yada yada.
You don't
right?
want anything to do with it.
Right. So I think we have to be mindful of the degree or lack thereof of kind of scientific literacy
Yeah.
among the public. And again, this is not to bash the public necessarily. They just haven't had the opportunity to get the full story, to resolve the
Sure.
whole picture.